Well, let's get started. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first series of our financial webinars. This is a collaborative effort of NCOFCU and TCT Solutions. Today, we're going to be covering vital signs of your credit union and how to interpret them. In the future, we're going to have some on interest rate risk, portfolio management, costing out your services, and hopefully at the annual meeting, we'll be discussing risk management and improving earnings. Our speaker today is Randy Thompson. He's a PhD and CEO and founder of TCT Solutions, which is a QSO. He has consulted with credit unions for over 32 years, holds an advanced degree, a PhD and MS in finance, statistics, economics, and public health. He's taught graduate courses in finance, statistics at several local Western universities. So let's welcome Randy Thompson this afternoon and listen to what he has to say. Thank you.
Tremendous. Thank you, Grant, so much. We appreciate the partnership, the opportunity to work together, and we always look for opportunities to help our credit union friends. So today we're going to spend a minute. I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction. We've created some slides. I know we have limited time. There's so much going on, so I'm just going to dig right in to what we're talking about. All living creatures, every machine, every business are unique systems. Okay, we're a unique system, every one of us. And they're made up of dynamics, constraints, and conditions. Okay? And when we look at those systems, there's a systems theory that's put together. And what it suggests that there's 5 specific components or descriptors or concepts that explain and talk about why some systems work and some systems don't. And concept 1 is they're all driven by guiding principles, okay? Number 2, this is where we start getting into what we're talking about today, is they're made up of interrelated and interdependent parts. Unique parts, but they're all connected together. And when they're connected together, they become more than the sum of the individual parts. That's how a system works. The next is that if you change one part of the system, it affects other parts in usually predictable ways. You know, we see how they all fit together, and understanding how they fit together and affect each other becomes crucial. The 4th one is that positive growth of a system. If you want your system to grow, be healthy, do well, it's got to adapt to its environment. Whether it's a human body, an automobile, or a business like a credit union, it's got to be able to adapt. And the 5th one is that if we don't understand, if we don't adapt based around that common purpose, the systems fail. So we're going to be looking at the system and understanding those parts and understanding if we have adapted effectively. One of the primary things we need to do is understand what are those indicators, those that tell us about those parts, to see if they're working well. One of the best examples I've found, especially when I was working on a doctorate in public health, is this idea of vital signs. So we're very used to that. If anyone who's been to the doctor and gotten past the insurance gatekeeper and walked back into the room, you know, one of the very first things they do is take your blood pressure, put you on the scale, which I personally hate, take your pulse, your temperature. Those are all crucial because they're what are called vital signs. When I hear the term 120/80, I know that's a vital sign, because a vital sign is not just a number, it's a number for which we know a healthy range. So they're very important to the human system because they tell us, is our blood pumping at the right pressure? Is our temperature show that we're in a healthy range? And we all use those. We're used to those, and we monitor those on a regular basis. Doctors know that if they change one part, it can affect other parts. For example, a simple example, well, if any of you have ever had a stuffy nose, you know, can't breathe, and you take Sudafed to clean out your nose. At the same time that you're cleaning out and you're able to breathe, you're also raising your blood pressure as much as 20 or 30 points. So they're always interrelated. They always interact together. There's that interaction that's very important. And so doctors in the medical field have found out what are those key things to watch to indicate that your body's healthy. We look at a car has the same thing. There are specific vital signs. that are many times on the indicator of the dashboard of the car, like oil pressure. We know there's got to be enough oil pressure to keep the oil circulating so the car doesn't burn up. We got with the engine temperature. We don't want it to get too hot. Our engine RPM, we don't want it to be racing too hard, because if it does one of these things too excessively, it causes other parts of the system to break down, not do well. The important thing here is, or one important thing, is that there are key indicators, key measures that we know are vital to the operation of this institution. Well, credit unions are unique, have unique systems with unique vital signs as well. They measure key components to say, how are they doing? They can be standardized and they can be compared to benchmarks. They pinpoint areas where we're strong and where we need to be strengthened. And they can be very, very specific, okay? Now, I'm going to skip over to here, because the key here is, how do we know which indicators to look at? What's important? See, there are tons of measures for the human body. We could look at the length of your toenails, the color of your hair, the length of your hair. We could look at the color of your eyes. We could look at, a number of variables. But none of them would necessarily tell us if you're healthy, like blood pressure, temperature, pulse, and respiration do. Those are absolutely linked and predictive. So the key here is, what indicators do we measure? How often do we measure? What's the healthy range that we're looking at? What's the 120/80? And when we do this, what I like to point out is what's known as, now I don't call it, this is Occam's razor from statistics. It says the principle in science that assumptions, I'm not going to read this whole thing, it's kind of boring. Basically, it says the simplest answer is usually the best. What we find oftentimes is that we see credit unions where management and boards create massive dashboards that have 50 or 60 or 100 different things on them. I've looked at the FPR reports that come from the NCUA, and they're massive. Do we really need to keep track of that many things? Because see, what happens is when we try to keep track of that many variables, they all blend together and they start coalescing into something that's hard to understand. Also, without understanding which ones are important, it's very easy to look at the wrong thing. For example, we had a credit union, about a $25 million credit union, moderate-sized credit union, who we were working with. And the CEO had moved their credit union to a new building. We went through some changes. And over a period of 2 years, she found herself every month, she'd calculate her earnings, and she would then do her allowance provision requirement, and her provision would just about wipe out every month her small profit that she had. She was readjusting. And she decided she had a provision problem. Started contracting her loans, contracting her loan approval process. And it got worse. When we did the analysis on the vital signs, we found out she did not have a underwriting problem. She did not have a allowance for loan loss problem. She had a loan yield problem. She was correcting the wrong thing. So identifying the key factors that are important and identifying what to do with them over time is really crucial. So it comes back to another way of stating Occam's razor, which is, if you hear hoofbeats, don't think zebras. It's the simplest answer is usually the best. So with that in mind, what we did over a series of 10 to 12 years was collect data and run core or multiple regression models. Because multiple regression is a technique that actually says what causes something else to happen. What's the cause and effect? Correlation is a different thing. Two things happening at the same time, but not necessarily connected to each other. A regression says this actually causes the other thing to happen. And what we're looking for is what causes a credit union to be healthy. And what we found is that there are 4 key variables with 13 supporting ones. Those 4 key variables are equity ratio, loan to share, ROA, deposit mix. We're going to go through those in detail in just a moment. Those 4, again, remember Occam's razor, the simplest answer is usually the best. Those 4 give just like blood pressure, temperature, and pulse, give an immediate picture of what's going on in the credit union, just like the others give what's going on in the body, and give us an idea of how healthy the credit union is. In addition, we have 13 supporting indicators that help explain why those 4 are doing well or not. Also, we were able to identify ranges like the 120/80 so that we can say, are you in the green zone, healthy, everything's fine, 120/80? Are you in the yellow zone, 130/90? Okay, we're slightly out, it can still be handled. Or are you in an area where there's a significant problem where you're in the red zone? As you can see here, as we look at these, we can able to monitor them and determine if things are going well or not. And here's an example. We're going to look at all these in a sample report. The top 4 key: cost of funds and payout ratio, asset and deposit and loan growth, loan yield, all the yields, a calculation of net fee subsidy, which I'll explain in just a moment, and then 2 measures of delinquency, really that's risk tolerance on the last ones. When we put them together, we get something that looks like this. We're going to be looking at a sample in just a minute, but I want to show you, here's an example where we have the variables indicating green and yellow, just outside of the range, all the way down, things going very well. Or another one could look like this, with green but some reds that aren't doing quite as well. Or a third one where we've got greens and yellows all up here, but some real red problems down in here. Or yet a different perspective where we've got a breakout this way. Again, the key here is green, healthy. Things are going well. Red, significant problem that requires specific immediate attention. And yellow is a caution. Caution, watch it closely to be sure that you're doing the right thing. With that in mind, what we're going to do is move over to an actual example, and I'm going to walk you through. If you have not received your vital sign report, I'll just mention, we have this program now on our website so that it is updated automatically for our clients every quarter when their 5300 is published. Right there on the website, they can click on and get it. And it goes through and identifies on an ongoing basis how the credit union is doing from a vital signs perspective. These give the key elements of how the credit union is going. So let's talk for a minute with the time we've got left. Let's go through these variables and kind of understand what they mean, why they're important, and how to interpret them. We're going to start at the top with equity ratio. By the way, reviewing these financials, I've found is actually one of the best financial literacy presentations for a board of directors. Going through this, they understand how their credit union is doing and really can ask and answer good questions about how their performance is. Let's start with equity ratio. Notice here we have a healthy range. Do you mean you can have too much equity? Actually, almost all financial analysts will suggest to you that excess equity is a problem. The reason, especially for credit unions, is because we're not investing adequately in systems to serve our members. So equity ratio, being in this healthy range, equity is important. It's at the top of the list because it is the measure of how much risk we can take. We're in the risk management business, and our ability to assume and exploit risk is really directly affected by how much equity we have set aside, what kind of a cushion we have to protect us in that equity position. These numbers, as you'll notice, don't have anything to do with the NCOA or state guidelines on 7% or whatever number they're using. These numbers come from where credit unions arrive at that gives them the cushion they need to take the risk they need to take to adequately serve their members and operate a healthy credit union. So this first number here, of course, equity. Equity is the accumulated earnings over the life of the credit union. So that's the first number, and being in the healthy range is important. You can have excess, and that's an important number to be watching, the starting point. And it's important because our ability to assume interest rate risk directly linked to our equity position. Our ability to take risks on consumer loans and reaching out and serving the underserved directly connected to equity position. So the first one, equity, which is equity divided by assets, gives us that number there. The next is loan to share. And it's an interesting one here. I like to tell a little story when I talk about this. I was in Hawaii visiting a client on Oahu, and right across the street was a ukulele manufacturer who happened to be a member of the credit union. And they said, would you like to tour them? And I said, you know, I play the guitar. I'd love to see how these little things are built. It'd be really fascinating. So they called over and talked to the owner, and the owner said, sure, come on over. When we walked over, we walked in through the back of the building because I wanted to see all the goings on, how they build them. But what I saw were stacks of raw material. There were 3 stacks of wood, kind of wood they use. Varying sizes spread out. There was boxes of nylon string, there were metal capos, there was the tuners, the twisty tuners, all the different components were laying around different parts of the back room. The success of their business was not measured by how well they could acquire raw materials. The success of their business was measured by how effectively and efficiently they took those raw materials and used those to create final product, the ukulele, and sell it out at a profit. That's the success of the business. Well, why am I talking about ukuleles? Because I think that relates directly to credit unions as well. Our raw materials are deposits. Deposits are not our products. They're our raw materials. And our ability to take raw materials and convert those into loans to serve our members is the measure of the effectiveness, one of the key measures of the effectiveness of our organization. And so this number here, as you can see, this credit union is actively converting 49% of their raw materials into loans, into final products. That's a problem. We're going to see that that plays out in a number of other areas that feed into this. But imagine if we had a restaurant that had 10 crabs and they could only sell 5 of them. Why would they purchase that many? Why would you purchase, if you're a manufacturing company, if you're a sales company, if you're a financial company, why would you purchase more than the raw materials that you need to produce your final product? So this number here is a key indicator of how efficiently this business is performing, this credit union is performing its primary business task, which is converting raw materials deposits into loans. And this is an area where we've spent a lot of time with credit unions helping them to grow. I was just this last weekend with a client who has gone from 30% loan to share to 87% loan to share. And they are doing very well now, very well. The third indicator is ROA, return on assets. All of these are divided by something, most of them by assets. And this is an interesting number. I like to talk about that just a little bit. You know, this is a measure of how efficiently we are generating a return from our operations. Now, it's key and important because this only source of equity that credit unions have is earnings. That's it. That's the only place where we can get equity to allow us to grow and to get the cushion we need to take the service to serve, the risk to serve our members. And so this ROA number is very important. However, is 1% really necessary? Do you know where the 1% target came from? It wasn't created by credit unions. It was created by banks to come up with a measure that they could meet to that would help them increase the sales price of their stock. Well, we don't sell stock. And so this number is kind of interesting. If you notice, we don't have a 1% number as a benchmark here. And for some credit unions who have very high equity, being down in the yellow zone is probably healthy because they don't need to grow equity. They need to spend more money serving their members. And so these three are very closely related. The fourth of the primary indicators is the core to high yield deposit indicator. This is unique to us in our calculation. And let me just talk about it just a minute. In a credit union, we have two primary groups of deposits. They're made up of different types, but there's two groups. One is core deposits. That's our checking and our savings. They're the least expensive and the most loyal deposits, stickiest deposits we have. Those are our core. Then we have money markets and CDs and the other types that are typically higher cost. We have to pay higher dividend interest on them just to hold on to those deposits. Now, what we found is that there's a relationship here. Let me go back to my ukulele story, if I may. As I mentioned, I walked in that back door and I saw 3 stacks of wood, identical wood. At least to the eye, it looked identical. One stack was very large, another one was medium size, and one was very small. And I said, could you please explain to me why you got the wood broken out this way? It looks a little different, a little unique. And they said, well, that great big stack there, that's the $5 wood. And we buy as much of that as we possibly can because it's all equal. It's just we're able to get that for $5 per unit, whatever that unit was. And the next stack is $7 wood. And we only buy as much of that as we have to until we've run out of that source. And then we buy a little bit of the $12 wood, which is the tiny stack you see down there. As much of 5 as we can get, 7 as much as we need, 12 only if we have to. Well, if you think about it, those deposit types we talked about correlate directly to that. Our $5 wood is our checking and savings accounts, our core deposits. Our money markets and CDs, that's the $7 wood. And if we have to borrow from our line of credit, that's the $12 wood. Well, what we found in our analysis is that there is a healthy relationship, a healthy ratio between core deposits and high yield deposits. And what we found is that the healthiest credit unions have, as a minimum, $95 of core for every $100 of high yield. Now, the bigger that number is, the better it is for them. And in this case, you'll see that this credit union has $524 of checking and savings for every $100 of money markets and CDs. So they've been very efficient in making sure that they're building their credit union's performance on the lowest cost deposits. Let me rephrase that, the lowest cost raw materials they possibly can. Now, if you think about it, here we have how are they acquiring their raw materials? Starting point of the business. Here we have, right here, how efficiently are they turning those raw materials into final product? Now, they're acquiring the raw materials very efficiently here, but it appears they're having trouble converting those to final product. As a result, they've got a lower than optimal level of earnings to build and grow that equity position. They're healthy now, but if they continue to grow and don't have adequate income to support that equity growth, that could become a problem in the future. Here you have in these top 4 the key functions of the health of the credit union. Now let's go on down and just talk a little bit about these other areas. Cost of funds, well, that's one we're all familiar with. Average cost for the deposits. What are we paying on average for the deposits? And you'll see there, they're right in that healthy range. We add one more, which is payout ratio. That's unique to us. Payout ratio is what percentage of your interest income are you paying out in interest expense? Because if you only have 49% of your deposits earning as loans, that means you got 51% earning as investments with very low yield. That takes us down to these yield numbers down here, which we're going to talk about next. Well, almost next. And here we can see that even though their rate is in the healthy range, at the bottom of the healthy range, because of this mix here, their payout ratio, their percentage of interest that's being paid out to cover their deposits is higher than the healthy range and needs to be paid attention to. Again, tying back to this key ratio here, what's our loan to share ratio? Now, growth numbers, just important. We need to grow to be healthy. And you can see here, these growth numbers are appropriate here, but loan growth is in the negative. They're losing loans. I'll be darned. That ties right back up to this issue. Remember, interrelated parts in the system that affect each other. And when we change one, it reverberates through in usually predictable ways. If loan growth starts dropping off, then we can have excess deposits and a low loan to share ratio. Let's go down to the yield numbers just for a minute. If we look down at the yields, this tells us if we're getting the return that we need. Loan yield is below and actually getting very, over here would have been in the red zone. Loan yield is low. Investments are fine, but notice when we take 51% of our deposits, our raw materials going out at this rate, and 49 here, our overall earning position is problematic. So again, what's the health of this credit union? We can target specific areas that are problematic that need attention. And it appears loan growth and loan pricing are problematic and need attention. Let's go down to one other area. I'm going to go two more areas here just to go through. Here we're going to look at a basic axiom that many financial analysts will suggest, and that is that your net interest income, I'll explain what that is in just a moment, net interest income should be equal to or greater than your operating expenses. And think about it, lending for credit unions is our primary business. It's our primary purpose. It's our primary activity. And most businesses want to know that their primary business, their primary function has adequate earnings to cover their operating expenses. So here what we're saying is net interest, our net interest margin or net interest income, which is total interest income minus interest expense divided by assets, so that we can compare these two. We divide it by assets, turn it into a ratio. We're earning 2.54% of assets, 2.54, but we're spending 3.22. Now, this credit union's operating expenses are in the healthy range. They're not more expensive than you would think they should be, but they're just not earning enough. As a result, when we subtract out this 322 from the 254 net interest margin or net interest income, it shows that this credit union is dependent on fees. As a matter of fact, they have to generate 68 basis points of fee income just to break even. I have found so far in the country 16 credit unions that are not fee dependent. The largest number I've seen there is 2.17. That means they got to generate 2% plus of fees just to break even. Here, this is 0.68. We did a study recently for the California and Nevada Credit Union League through their Shapiro group, and we found that the average fee level for credit unions is right around 57 basis points. Now that's kind of an interesting perspective. This credit union has to do better than the average income just to break even, not to generate a profit, just to break even. So this is a key element. Credit unions over the last 10 years have become extremely fee dependent. That's not a good place to be. So this is an important number. And again, this low interest income, which links back to the yield, which links back to the growth, directly affected by this low loan to share ratio. So we start to see what is the key element. I don't want to look at all the other FPR things that NCOA throws in there. I want to look at the key element. Remember, Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the best, almost always. If you hear hoofbeats, don't think zebras, look for horses. This is what we're looking at here. So now let's take a look at one more piece, the last piece of this analysis, and that is delinquency ratio and charge-off. When I talk to board members, a lot of them around the country, one of the things I hear the most is we need to get rid of those charge-offs. We need a zero delinquency. Well, let me share with you a personal story. When I am a recovering banker. I spent about 12 years as a vice president of a large regional bank. When I was a young, developing bank manager, I was sent out to a little branch in Kaysville, Utah. And we had regular meetings of all the branches in this division in the senior vice president's office, 25 of us sitting around that big office. And he would go through our performance data in front of all of our peers. Talk about peer pressure. And I'll never forget on this one month we met, and I had achieved a zero delinquency ratio. I had no delinquent loans in my shop. And I sat down there and I was thinking, this is my day to shine. I mean, I was feeling no pain. I was happy. I was going to be the star that day. And I was about the 7th or 8th one up, I remember. That day I was sitting waiting to stand up and, yep, that's me, zero delinquency. Look at me, I'm the star. I'll never forget the senior vice president, Mr. Heiner. He looked at my report, he pulled it over, looked at it, he looked down. He looked up at me, kind of a quizzical look. He looked down. He looked up a second time. He looked down a third time. And he looked up at me and he said, zero delinquency? What is wrong with you? Are you afraid to make loans? I wasn't the star. You see, there is a certain amount, we're taking risk. Remember we said up here at the top, how much risk can we take if we've got the equity to do that? Charge-offs are a cost of doing business. Delinquencies are a cost of doing business. There is a healthy range, there's a healthy amount, and zero isn't it. So what we look at here is you'll notice there's a healthy range. And this credit union is below it. Now, isn't that interesting? They are risk averse, which directly is affecting loan growth and loan to share and directly impacting earnings and their fee dependency. They're not earning enough to cover their costs. And being risk averse seems to be at the heart of the problem. We need to help them to take some more risk. Let me share one more quick story and then we'll be done. I was talking with a client in Northern California just several months ago, one that was trying to grow their loans. Not trying, was very effectively growing their loans. And the CEO called me and said, Randy, we got a problem. I just did my allowance calculation and it has doubled. It is twice what it was last quarter. Twice. Well, she was panicked and she was worried and she didn't think maybe she needed to slow down that loan growth. That was just not good. So I said, well, let's take a look at your earnings. What's happened with your earnings? Yes, your delinquencies and your charge-offs have doubled up into the healthy range, as a matter of fact. You've gone from these numbers up to about 42. But what's happened to your earnings? And her earnings had tripled. For every additional dollar of charge-off, she had $3 of additional earnings. This number down here is a very important contributing factor to what's happening up here. Okay, well, I think I've consumed my time. I'm just about out of time. I hope that this has been interesting and useful to you as you consider monitoring the success of your credit union. We'd love to be able to go through it with you. If you did, any of you would like to go through your specific vital signs with us, I'm not asking for a sales call. I'm just saying we say we don't have clients, we have friends. So if any of you would like to have more detail, ask questions, email us or call us, and we're happy to go through it with you. Thank you very much, Grant, for letting us have this opportunity, and thank all of you for spending time with us for us to share this information. I wish you the best, and please stay healthy.
Thank you very much,
Grant, I'll
Randy.
turn the time back to you.
Thank you very much, Randy. And I hope everybody else found this very interesting. And we're looking forward to our next presentation. We will send out an announcement of when that will be. And thank you again for everybody attending.
Have a great day. It's such a